Welcome to the One for the Road podcast. My name is Mr. K. Alongside of me, as usual, C Squared. Tonight's show, distress in the U.S. IT market. I thought we'd talk about a few topics here. What are the factors causing this? Why do big firms like Amazon and Google and Meta and Microsoft have layoffs like every year since 2022? Why Apple doesn't seem to have that many layoffs. We'll just talk about that and maybe some theories on why. What critical job roles are being punished the most in this purge of IT jobs lately? And we'll discuss and comment on the top 5 factors that are causing IT job reductions. We'll also talk about what is potentially driving the decline in programming jobs. So I was looking at layoffs and trends. Another trend that doesn't seem to be talked about much is that a lot of firms are decreasing, and especially big tech firms, some of which I just mentioned. There's not many job openings. So, for example, in 2024, Amazon and Meta job openings ranged from 37 to 50% less than the year before. So, what's interesting in all of this is that there doesn't seem to be a lot of openings for IT jobs.
Well, and so there's a bunch of things I could say about that, John. Which is when growth stops, is there a trend that basically says when the company's growth stops, they need less IT people? The other thought is
Right.
they need less people in general, not IT people. They need less people in general because they're not growing at the same rate. So that is a possibility, and that's obviously a legitimate way to run your business. The other thought is how many of these people think that AI is going to take over these jobs.
Right.
Maybe it
Right.
will, maybe it won't. I haven't seen anything that currently indicates that that is next week. Could be,
Right.
in 6 months or 6 years, but I don't see that it's next week. But the third thought, which I have seen in many, many companies, is they seem to think that it's always for accounting and executive management. The grass is greener somewhere else. We can
Right.
take the lowest third of these people and chuck them to the door and hire a bunch of better people for either the same amount of money, or if it really is about money, for less money. That,
Right.
in my experience, in my multi-decade experience, never pans out.
Right.
Never once have I ever seen that pan out. So if they're going by that model, it's complete and utter foolishness that they think that would actually pan out, in the fact that you're going to dump the bottom third and replace them with a better third. Uh,
Right.
the other thought that is not ever factored in is how disruptive that is to a functional team.
Yes.
So the bottom line is if you are saying everybody on the team is a superstar, first of all, that never has worked for basketball teams
Right. Right.
or
Or
baseball teams.
any
Yeah,
sport.
it really has not worked that everybody is a superstar. Guess what? That you have ego bashing
Oh yeah.
against each other almost immediately, and because everybody thinks they're a star, that's number one. Number two, it's just never been cohesive for building a team, because everybody wants to be the great the one and only superstar, right?
Right. The star.
So what you've done for teamwork is completely flushed out. If you were supposed to operate as a project team, and everybody had a bunch of tasks that were coming from the same bucket, the bottom line is that uh, somebody has to do the lesser task
Right.
hand, and the other thing is they have to do it um, in a cohesive manner with the greater tasks, which says I need a working relationship with the dude in the cube over, if there ever is
Right.
such a thing as the guy in the cube over anymore. The
Mm,
guy, the
not
other guy
really.
that joins my live, that joins the webcast when we're
Right.
discussing what's going on, man.
Right.
I need to have that cohesion. And executive management and accounting have never ever acknowledged that how disruptive that is to actual teamwork. And I have
Right.
firsthand experience in that. So,
Right, right, right. Out of that came the outsourcing paradigm, and the other the wild thing about the outsourcing paradigm was, I mean, a lot of it, the time zone differences and some language barriers and stuff like that. I don't think they saw coming. I think it works in spots. I think there's, I mean, there's a lot of experimentation and just downright getting lucky when it comes to outsourcing. So, one thing is, there's been this notion. What a lot of articles I was reading was that the straight computer programmer, the person you just hire, hey, write this code, here are my requirements, the number of those people in the US has plummeted to levels at like 1980, before the internet was invented and stuff like that. And what they keep saying, and they're like, that role that the role of the software developer or the software engineer is still high, and those people have multiple skills, but just the straight coder, those jobs are decreasing. You got
yeah,
a comment
and
on
I
that?
would almost consider that role, an architecture role
Right.
in my mind, because you actually are architecting the solution and how the pieces fit together. And you don't want to pay everybody at an architect level, but
No.
in all honesty, that is part of building a team. Is um, um is in fact, if you go to the thought of pair programming, where people were programming together, and companies did hate that quite a bit. And
Yeah.
what the bottom line is that actually worked, and it was the collective mind will come up with a better answer than an individual in many, many instances. Will
Right.
come up with the better, less defective answer in many, many instances. But nobody bought into that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Pair programming is really a great concept, and yeah, there's been, I haven't really, in my experience too, that hasn't really caught on, which is a shame. And there's a few areas where I did see it, especially with some projects. It was quite beneficial. I got a list here of what's potentially driving the decline in just straight programming jobs. And we mentioned it a little bit. We've mentioned this before. Automation and AI are replacing routine coding. Again, we can talk about this. We've talked about it before, but yes, there are tools out there that seem to be, I can go into ChatGPT, ask it, hey, write me a program in Python that'll do this, and it'll spit out code. I have found that 40-50% of the time, that code will not run. And I
Oh,
have to
right.
go in and debug it myself.
Yeah, I have never seen it run. And the bottom line is that because you're variabilizing system parameters. So you're either calling the system name directly, or you have variabilized that in a properties file. And the bottom line is it doesn't know any of those name value pairs that
Right.
essentially have been variabilized. So at a minimum, you are going to have to recode that to make all the variable names correct.
Right,
You know,
right, right. Yeah, and then they're like, test that took hours takes minutes and seconds. Yeah, but I mean, it's spitting out stuff that doesn't run. It's not
that's
functional.
the
So
that
any
yeah,
time
that is the other
savings,
end of the spectrum is the flat out this code is crap.
right? We got it really fast. All right, yeah. I mean, I could rush the same type of quality too.
Well, so the bottom line is that I don't understand what the difference between that and it's a smarter search engine. So what is the difference between that and um, and a search engine that brings back coding examples? And you know, it's like
Right,
that, yeah, that I can cut and paste. There is almost no difference because that's what it's doing on the back end is essentially going through that search engine and determining what coding examples it has that fit that model and using the best one. So it is handy in that aspect.
right,
I
right,
do use it. I do use Code Assist. The bottom line is that I know what I'm getting back. In some cases needs to be modified. um, in the best case scenario needs to be modified with variable names and tweaking possible libraries and stuff like that. But the other aspect is in the worst case scenario, this is totally worthless junk. It doesn't fit into anything that I'm doing here.
right.
So I didn't mean to go down that rabbit hole, but I
No,
think that
that's good.
again, that on the upper level, on the business level, that's being sold to executives of you don't need a person to do this, which is a complete and utter fabrication, fallacy,
Right,
etc. That a computer is going to write all your code for you and know all your variable names and system names. That ain't happening, dude.
right, right, right,
Yeah.
right. And that brings up the point you made earlier is like if we have AI doing all the programming, what's the definition of a team then? And the team
Yeah.
dynamics. And there are massive benefits to having a team, having a good team. And every good team, someone has a role. What,
Yeah.
what
Right.
does that look like in the AI world?
Right.
I'm thinking
Right.
a mess.
Right. Exactly. Because again, this is, I have seen nothing to demonstrate that AI, and we have had numerous discussions, I have seen nothing to demonstrate that AI is nothing more than a very advanced, super advanced search engine
Right,
that also has the ability to wire the results back to an action that I would consider is being performed by a driver, not by
right,
AI, right? So the bottom line is that you have let's just simplify a Tesla. I have a driver for the steering, I have a driver for the gas, I have a driver for the brake, and I have a
right,
driver for the transmission, forward and reverse, right? Or they obviously don't have transmissions, but I have the driver for whatever they consider the transmission in the wheel that takes me forward and backward. Um, uh, uh, from that aspect, those drivers are unless they're being updated, they're potentially static chunks of code already.
right,
So the thing that is saying turn right, turn left, apply brake here, that is a static driver. So the only thing you are using the AI aspect of this for is to do, which is what it is, super rapid millisecond, sub millisecond decision
right,
making on again being a super advanced search engine on um uh comparison of patterns. And
Right.
so I have identified on pattern identification is what I basically should have said. Um, so a super fast search engine on pattern matching and pattern identification. And then it is essentially sending over those parameters to static drivers to enact that uh, that pattern recognition, the results of that pattern recognition into some physical form. And
Right. Right. Right.
so
Mac.
all this, the robot is alive, and my car is alive. Uh, No,
Yeah. Not
absolutely not,
today.
dude. And for all the executive management and and accounting buying into anybody telling them this garbage that they should replace
Right.
their entire workforce, with this garbage is a bunch of foolishness.
Right. Right.
That
Right.
I basically defined the two components, the high level of the two components. One being a super advanced pattern recognition search engine, man.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
So yeah, we talked about this before, and my take on AI is it's a pretty good assistant, and
Yep.
Microsoft's done, I think, a good job of marketing it as an assistant. So at the basic level, I've seen like Google and Microsoft, as you're typing in a sentence, to your point, are recognizing patterns and are auto filling in your sentence for you based on pattern recognition of what you've done before and also based on grammatical best practice patterns. So at the
Right.
basic minimum that a lot of people have had contact with is it's an assistant to help you write sentences. And
Right.
let's
And
do a
they call
simple
that
example.
predictive AI,
Right,
but realistically, how predictive is it? And
right.
it's like Wall Street has been working on
Yeah.
predictive models, forget AI,
So,
predictive models for 35 years,
right, right,
dude.
right,
Computerized predictive models. They've been working on actual, just written predictive models for 100 years,
right,
man. And so, you know, how well has that worked out, man?
right. Yeah, I'll end with this, and then we can go to the next one. Is I've seen GitHub Copilot does a decent job while you're coding to
Yeah.
help you and assist you, and maybe now and then be like, "Hey, have you thought of doing this?"
Yeah,
So I
absolutely. Writing the sentence, I agree with you. Writing the sentence when you essentially hit the tab or the space bar or
right,
whatever it is, the tab,
yep,
I believe,
usually tab.
is helpful,
Gotcha.
very helpful.
Yes.
Um, uh, and some of the code it writes give you some coding ideas, but if you think you're not going to have to modify that code, so
Oh, right, right,
back
right, right.
to
And
the
again, as an
core
assistant,
back to the core of this. So you have a bunch of executives being told that the robot is going to replace the coder and be not never factoring in that the for the live people that constant change is very disruptive to cohesive teams.
right,
Right.
right,
So,
yep,
I've seen no companies that almost no companies that ever factor that in hand.
right,
Because guess what? It sounds so great on my business plan,
yeah,
on my quarterly business plan on how I'm going to generate a bunch of new revenue, which may or may not occur.
right. So
It's
the
all
second reason on what's potentially driving the decline in programming jobs, pretty good lead in, is offshore outsourcing of coding jobs. Countries like India, Ukraine, the Philippines have built robust IT industries. They work at lower they will work for lower U.S. salaries, and hence the allure and the popularity of that option.
Yep.
Uh,
Now,
I
in the same thing, outsourcing was going to be, you know, sold to executives who, again,
oh yes,
no clue. There are some really smart people that I've met in the offshore world. There's also some really dumb people that I have met
right,
in the offshore
right,
world. So
oh
guess
yes,
what? That is that statistical analysis of there's some really smart people and some really dumb people in every country.
in the world,
Shocking,
right,
shocking, and that
right,
some people in every culture excel at what they're doing, and some people are average.
right,
So what value did you get there? You know, it's like you look at uh, certain people who are potential politicians running around saying stupid stuff like that. And it's like saying, you know, promoting how much better offshoring is. And the answer is no, it's not. It may
no,
be cheaper. It may
right,
very well be cheaper, but it's not better. You know what it is? Exactly the same as what
right,
you were getting
right,
before. Some people
right,
are smart and some people ain't that smart. So
right,
that's
exactly.
exactly what you were getting before because that is how every culture it functions.
Right.
Yeah.
So my the thing I've run into, and you brought it up a little bit, is it's cheaper. Well, if you pick a really bad outsourcing company and these people perform at a level 10% of the people you laid off, it's not cheaper. If they take 6 times longer to deliver something, then the guy and he came at half the cost. There's no cost savings. You've lost your cost savings. So
Right.
if you do not pick strategically and correctly your offshore partner and the talent level, then you have not saved money.
No, no, right. Exactly. And you go again. Um, I thought I had made this up, but I may be presumptuous that I have because somebody said it on a financial podcast and they quoted it to somebody else who was older than me. Cost is what you pay, and value is what you get or
Right,
derive.
right,
And sometimes those two are analogous and associated with each other, and sometimes they ain't.
right,
So the bottom line is you need to evaluate that scenario. Cost is what you pay, value is what you derive from what
right.
you just purchased, right? And
Yes.
so to constantly associate those two is actually stupidity.
Right, right. And yeah, I'll put a nail in the coffin that, if if you look at the cost savings. I was like, these people can't deliver. So there was no cost savings. I mean, the
Right.
bottom line is they have to deliver
Yeah,
at the
right, exactly. And what did they deliver
right,
comparatively, right?
right,
You know, and I guess you could ask how important is that? So maybe we should dig into Google or Amazon laying all these people off and saying, are these the projects that it doesn't really matter? Elon
right,
is probably not laying off the core designers of the AI of his auto driving technology. Because I'm
right,
imagining somebody had mentioned it was 3 trillion parameters that actually that essentially go along with that. So um, the people that wrote that are obviously pretty darn intelligent because those parameters are related to, from what I understand, watching video and uh, patterning uh, the cause and outcome of what just occurred in that video.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
so so you know what is Elon maybe laying off the dude who designed the electric door lock and the
Right,
car?
right.
Maybe he's pretty sure ain't laying off the guy who was doing advanced stuff related to the auto driving space. So I guess it would be valuable to look at that scenario of who's getting turned over, but you know, on the same token, you look at it and say, very disruptive to that, to the team they were on, and and any analogous team in the project that had some interface with them.
Right, right, right. And I think, the offshore outsourcing, I mean, you're not going to outsource a doctorate in mathematics or computer science.
Right.
And to your point, those people are core. I think the dream of offshore and outsourcing, of course, was always to save money. Hey, I can get a stud programmer from India for half the cost. Well, was he a stud programmer? I mean, he was advertised, and then in actuality, he was 50% of the guy you laid off.
Yeah.
So it
Well, and
varies.
you know,
I
I
think it's been
always
hit or miss.
again, I've worked with some incredibly brilliant
Me
offshore
too.
folks. I also worked with the guy that deleted all the data out of the
Mm,
table when when we told him to rebuild the table,
mm. Oops.
that he essentially screwed up. I think that was his second incident. His first incident was recursively deleting entire
Mm,
file structure and then
mm.
deleting all the data without a backup
Master deleting.
out of a single table.
Yeah. And
And so
you
he
wiped away your
lasted
cost savings there.
3 weeks, and
Right, right.
so
That didn't
you
save the
know,
company money,
I
just
am not
mistakes.
writing. I am not writing predictive analysis for auto driving cars. I am also not deleting at
Right.
the contents of a table and recursively deleting a directory structure. So what's that worth to you, folks?
Right. I don't think offshore outsourcing was the magic bullet. It was first advertised as it's this wave of a wand and magic. We're going to have uh, the same level of expertise and programming at a half the cost. I think in areas when you got lucky that happened, but there's a lot of search and find along the way. Let's move on. We've got a couple more of these. Another reason why coding jobs have disappeared, the rise of low code, no code platforms. There's quite a few of these. I know Microsoft has quite a few of these, like Logic Apps and the like. Uh,
I will say,
Power
maybe
Automate.
I'm not. So I think that somebody had an IDE for a super advanced language called Smalltalk that
Yes.
initially did that. I can't recall who that was, but I will tell you this: IBM had a product many years ago for Java called Visual Age, and
Yes.
it did in fact do that.
Right.
Back in the day, there was no AI involved. You connected blocks of code visually in an ERD diagram
Yes, I
type of
remember.
scenario, and it generated the connectors for that. It was very slick.
Yeah, and there've been quite a few of them, and it's like, look, anybody can be a programmer, and like you said, it went way back. Visual Age for Java, you could write flow charts and have it generate code. Here's the thing: I those platforms are great. They might catch on, and yeah, the level of expertise might not be needed. But here's my problem: there are millions of lines of legacy code out there, and
Yep.
that those platforms are not going to help you. So
No.
there are. So here's a quick story. I'm going to college in the 80s and I'm taking a COBOL class. And the guy goes, "You may think COBOL is the worst and most arcane language in the world, but I'll tell you right now, there are millions of lines of legacy code in 1985 written in COBOL. And in 85, they were saying people are dying to get COBOL programmers to maintain this legacy code.
Right.
Jump forward to 2025, and I have been my whole career. I've been swimming in seas of Java,
Right.
and there's got to be billions of lines of code in Java. They are not going away, folks.
Well, and so you're locked into Java, but it is a mature programming language.
Oh yes,
Your point there, John, is all these point and click IDEs. You have no access to that code. I'm not sure that you own any of the code in the
right.
background for that point and click scenario. So, in that aspect, you are locked in, folks. If the
Mm,
vendor gets sold and bought by somebody else, or essentially um, just flat out decides to raise their profit margin, you're locked in, folks. You're going to pay whatever they tell you to write that check for, because you
right.
have no other choice.
Yeah. 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 That's a very good point, and you definitely want to avoid vendor lock-in. Number four, software development is becoming more about problem solving than coding. I would kind of agree with that. What do you think?
I think it always was about problem solving.
Yeah,
Even though,
that's a
IBM
good
first
point.
came out and it was about solving problems related to my accounting ledger. The bottom line, it always was about solving problems. The bottom line is the problems have become more complex. So,
Yes,
okay,
yes.
it seems cooler, but it was never not about that. And
Right, right, right. I agree too. We'll move on to the next one. Increase reliance on open source and pre-built solutions. I kind of agree with this. I mean, there's been the a lot of companies rely on open source. A lot of the guts of a lot of uh, enterprise-wide solutions run on open source software. It's a, I mean,
well, and so then there, in that aspect of, you're not paying for the software, and you're also getting the flexibility of, I have the source code. So at some point, if I have to fork this source code and build my own thing or get my
right,
code out of here, I fully have the ability to analyze the core framework because I have all the code for that. It might cost me an expensive programmer to actually do that,
right, right,
but
right, right,
it beats the heck out of, I'm totally locked into this solution, and now the vendor is licking their chops when the next contract cycle comes up. And
right. Right. And the point they make is if you have some certain requirements, why write the code if someone else in only open source land wrote it for you or wrote a library for you that you could utilize
right,
and stuff like that. Also with frameworks, uh, you can use a lot of really great frameworks in open source to build business solutions.
yeah, right,
That's a very good point there, and that's really a juxtaposition of where we are in 2025 as opposed to when we first started in the late 80s and early 90s, where the prevalence of open source and the quality of open source was at an absolute minimum, if nearly non-existent, especially if you didn't have internet access. Uh, so let's go to layoffs and some stats and maybe some reasons around layoffs. So I'll whip up some stats here. in the last couple of years from 2022 to 2024. Let's go with Amazon. Amazon laid off 18,000 people in 2023. Google most notable layoff was in January 2023, where they laid off 12,000 people. Microsoft's been laying off people too, folks. 3% of their workforce. They eliminated 10,000 jobs in January 2023. So January 2023 was not a good time, folks. Microsoft and Google were laying off tons of people. Meta in 2022 laid off 11,000 people. Meta had a pretty good run. They until 2022, they never had any layoffs, but they laid off 11,000 in November 2022. Apple's been pretty good. Apple really has only had like one bad layoff between 2022 and 2024. They only laid off 700 people. Most of them were connected to the Project Titan, not Triton, Titan.
Yeah.
That project got canceled, so they laid off all the people that were working on it. That was 700 people. Prior to that, I mean, there
Yeah.
was one way back in the early 80s with jobs and stuff, but they've been relatively good. Any thoughts on that, C squared?
Well, so that is legitimate. The project got canceled. The project's a
Yes.
disaster. That's legitimate. I mean,
Right.
the bottom line is, as a business owner, what are you going to do with all these people? And
Right. Right. Exactly.
the work is gone.
Right.
So
So reasons for there's been like as I alluded to in some of the stats I just went through. I mean, the tech industry seemed to be humming quite a bit. We never saw layoffs of this magnitude and just huge numbers. Also from the major companies too. So there's been some theories as to why layoffs have been really prevalent since 2022 till today. One of them is overhiring during the pandemic. During the COVID crisis in 2020, many tech companies, particularly in e-commerce, actually had a boom and needed tons of people. People were working remote like crazy. I count myself included during the pandemic. And then when the pandemic ceased, demand ceased, so they thought they had too many people and decided to lay people off. What do you think of that as a reason?
well, yeah, I didn't realize there was a hiring boom during the pandemic because it didn't seem that way
Right,
to me. It seemed like companies were staying pat. But if you statistically have that information, I can't dispute it. So um, I didn't feel like that was the case. I feel like they were used as an excuse to lay off people that were potentially self thinkers and were
right,
like, what? Um, uh, so, but from that aspect, maybe they did rehire people after that. It seemed like they were so busy working on their worthless HR policies.
right,
Um, to figure out what is uh, how they were going to move forward. That hiring, my thought was screeched to a halt. But
right,
yeah,
right. They said there was a particular uptick in e-commerce companies. When I hear that, I think Amazon, and
yeah,
Amazon did.
right,
It seemed right after, 2 years after, and things started to return to normal. I had this gigantic 18,000 job layoffs. So
yeah,
yeah, I think it varies by sector and location. But yeah, I'm with you, C squared. I mean, where we live, I didn't see tons of openings. Hey, it's a pandemic.
right.
There's
Hire a
huge
bunch of people.
job
You're
and
right.
hiring.
Yep.
I didn't see that either where we
Yep.
live. Uh, Second reason is economic downturn and inflation, slowing sales, fear of recession, high inflation have pressured companies to cut costs. What's the greatest way and easiest way to cut costs is lay off people.
Well, it could be increased. It probably is increased productivity, but since they don't have the ability to deliver that, very few companies have the ability to deliver that. I'll go with layoffs as a secondary option.
Right, right, exactly. The usual investor pressure and expectations. I mean, this almost boils down this list of why there's layoffs. Period. Investors often demand returns and may push companies to cut costs. That's more of a shareholder thing. That's been going on for eons.
And you look at it and say that some value in being
Right.
privately held,
Yes, yes, yes,
because
exactly.
you don't have to essentially try to appease
Right,
a certain percentage of the board who may not be operating in the best interest of the business, is probably operating in the best interest of themselves and their egos.
right, right. And what's interesting is me and you were alive when Google was private.
Yep.
And when Google was private, I mean, the innovation and the products were just like unbelievable. And the way they ran that company was just they were like the number one place everybody wanted to work with. They had free daycare and all sorts of
Right.
perks too, free food. I mean, it was just unbelievable. They go public, and then all that stuff goes away. And
Right.
Google is not the greatest place to work in anymore.
Right.
Uh, Technological advancements in automation, the rise of auto. Again, we're back to the rise of automation and AI is the reason why you would lay off people and why you would cut workforce. We went through this before. I'm really skeptical of that.
The other aspect is I don't want to harp on IBM, but at one time a team that I was familiar with had to deploy 3,200 servers into retail locations, and this is way pre the word AI. They may have neural networks, but I'm pretty sure we weren't using the neural network to manage all
Right,
3,200 of those instances.
right,
I think
right,
we were using a product called Tivoli.
right, right,
And bottom
right,
line is that, so again, what's new? What's
right,
new? That was that was literally 15 years ago.
right, right, right. So that's about it. Anything else?
No, I think I've said my piece.
Right, right. I think we cut on all the subjects. Yeah, that's about it. Let me do an outro. You can reach us via email, one for the road podcast at gmail.com. Our soon to be constructed website is onefortheroad.net. Like and subscribe to us on YouTube. We are on 3 audio platforms, rss.com, Podbean, and Spotify for C Squared. This is Mr. K. Have a great week.
Thanks, folks. Always appreciate you tuning in. Have a great week.